Okay, we'll get started. Is marijuana the best medicine? That's a pretty loaded question, huh? Kind of funny little picture there. I could just see me as a grandma with a bunch of grandmas sitting around a table. No, if I was ill. Should marijuana be a medical option? In 1970, Congress placed marijuana in Schedule 1, which we're going to talk about, of the Controlled Substance Act because they considered it to have no accepted medical use. Well, that was in 1970. To date, we have 29 out of 50 of the U.S. states and Washington, D.C., which have legalized the medical use of marijuana. Should marijuana be a medical option? Well, proponents say that it's safer than alcohol, which is legal, that it's a natural treatment for chronic pain, that it reduces symptoms of a lot of illnesses like Parkinson, Alzheimer's, cancer, and also helps increase appetites in patients with diseases that cause you to lose weight. And also, they also say that prescription opioids are far more addictive, like Vicodin, Oxycontin, and Valium. Opponents to the argument say it impairs cognitive skills. There's insufficient evidence as a pain relieving agent, and that there's a risk of abuse and addiction, and that it's an excuse for legalization and recreational use, and that it could lead to a lower quality of life and financial issues because of the expense. To date, medical marijuana use in the United States, like I said, it has legal in 29 states and DC. If you look at these dark green states, California, Washington, Nevada, you can see Oregon, the states that, Alaska, Colorado, Rhode Island, DC, Maine. There's several states that have completely legalized marijuana altogether. Then the darker green states, there's just a few, have decriminalized it and allow medical marijuana. In the medium green states, medical marijuana is allowed. And in these light green states, it's decriminalized. And then it's fully illegal in all the ones that are super light green. So, like Texas, where I live, it's totally illegal. Trends are in today's in the US and in today's world, that the national mood is changing. And in addition to the 29 states that have legalized medical marijuana, 10 states have legalized marijuana, period. But it's still illegal under federal law, even in states that legalize it. This causes a lot of distress for the legal system, in addition to people who are selling it, buying it, and using it. Despite federal prohibition, the Obama administration, when it was in place, took a relaxed approach to marijuana, generally letting states do as they wish as long as they met certain criteria, such as not letting legal pot fall into kids' hands or crossing state lines. But the Trump administration has taken a tougher line, allowing federal prosecutors to crack down on marijuana even in states where it's legal, which could let federal law enforcement shut down state legal pot businesses. Marijuana's criminal classification at the federal level has other serious ramifications for marijuana policy, even in places where state law says the drug is legal. Many state legal marijuana businesses, for instance, must function as cash-only enterprises, since many banks are nervous about dealing with businesses that are essentially breaking federal law. Businesses also can't file for several deductions, and as a result, their effective income tax rates soar to as high as 90% or more. The result is that even as several states and public opinion move in favor of marijuana legislation, the federal government often finds itself standing in the way of reform that many voters want after seeing the long-standing struggles and failures of the war on drugs? Here's a good graph of American support for legalization of marijuana, and you can see that it continues to rise. The majority of Americans favor legalized medical marijuana has risen from 12% in 1969 to 64% in 2017. And I don't have data past 2017 yet. Interestingly, the younger the age of the person, the more support you will find for legalizing marijuana. For example, 2/3 of all millennials, those are people born from 1981 to 1997, support this legislation for medical marijuana use. 66, again, that's about 2/3 of Gen Xers, 1965 to 1980 people would vote for medical marijuana legislation, positively for it. Baby boomers, people born between 1946 and 1964, support at 56%, so more than half. And traditionalists, people born between 1928 and 1945, are at 35% supportive. That's a lot of people supportive of medical marijuana use and legislation. So let's see what we all think about this. Let's get started with a small survey. We did this survey of our customer base of radiologic technologists and radiologists back in 2012. We did it again in 2015 and again in 2018. And I'll show you the questions first and then the answers so that you can answer for yourself and see how your own answers fit in with your peers. First question. Do you consider yourself an informed healthcare provider about the utilization of medical marijuana? Yes or no? Easy question, right? Think about it. You may type your answer into the drop-down Q&A box on the top right hand of your screen if you want to. You want to participate, just for your own fun, see how you rank. So do you consider yourself an informed healthcare provider about the utilization of medical marijuana? What does the survey say? Survey says, let's see, let's look at the majority of the 2015 people who responded to the survey in 2018 feel a lot more informed than they did back in 2015. So word's getting around. Education is out there. We have no excuse not to know a little bit more about what's going on. Does that agree with what you think? There's still 39% who don't feel like they know. 61% do now. It's interesting that some of these results that come out, they are. Question number 2. Do you believe that medical marijuana can be addictive or lead to psychological dependence? Yes or no? Feel free to participate. I'm giving you a minute. Is medical marijuana addictive or can it lead to psychological dependence? Okay, survey says. Interesting. Looks like a lot of people have reduced their opinion that marijuana is addictive. It's almost 50-50 now. People who do and don't believe that it's addictive. It used to be more. More people used to believe that it was addictive and caused psychological dependence than they do now. Okay, question number 3. Do you believe that the legalization of medical marijuana in some states has led to decreased experimentation with drugs by teenagers? Yes or no? And I'll give you a minute in case you want to type in your answer and participate. Okay, survey says, kind of fun to say, There's some upward growth in the number of people who think teenage experimentation is less in states that legalize marijuana. And there are some studies that show decreased use by teens in Colorado where marijuana is legal. So this makes sense. Next question, number 4. Do you believe that smoking medical marijuana has a significant health effect, the same as smoking regular tobacco cigarettes? And by significant health effect, it means negative health effect. Probably should have said that. We kept the question the same all those years. Yes or no? Give you a moment. Okay, survey says we've actually flipped on this since 2012. More people don't believe marijuana has a significant health effect, the same as smoking tobacco. It used to be 56.4, 57.4 people believe. Now it's down to 42.2 in 6 years. So there's a change going on. Okay, let's move on to question number 5. Do you believe that medical marijuana should be a medical option? Yes or no? Give you a moment. Okay, let's see what we got. This number's grown too. More people believe that medical marijuana should be a medical option than they did before. Interesting. And the number keeps going up. Do you know, question number 6, do you know what Dronabinol or Marinol is? Or have you heard about this drug? I'll give you a moment. Okay, let's see what you say. Survey says the number's risen quite a bit. We're going to talk about this man-made form of cannabis in just a bit. So we've gone up to 28.2% of you have heard about what Marinol or Dronabinol is. Hopefully not because you had to use it for an illness. Question number 7. Okay, this question was changed between 2012 and 2015 and eliminated in 2018. But in 2012, the question was, choose the state with the highest possession limits from the following top 3. Okay, don't worry about that. The answers were New Mexico had 12.2% people thought that it was the one, 24% of the people thought Oregon, 63 almost percent of people thought California. But things have changed. In 2015, the question stated, which states have legalized recreational use? To see how many people actually knew that recreational use was out there in some states being as legal. And these are the answers that your peers chose. Oregon, California, Washington, Colorado, Washington, D.C., and Alaska. Interesting. In 2018, there are 29 states, remember? We removed the question because more than half the states have legalized it now, and 10 have legalized it altogether. So more people know that, yes, there are lots of states with it legal altogether. Question number 8. Medical marijuana is classified by the Controlled Substance Act as having a high potential for abuse, which places it on which schedule? 1, 2, 3, or I don't know. I'll give you a moment. Okay. There we go. We are definitely going to discuss this in detail coming up, but suffice it to say more people know the correct answer now, but a lot of people are still in the dark on which schedule it falls in. We got a group for 1 and a group for I don't know. Less I don't knows than in 2015. That's good news. Question number 9. This is a long question. It's a multifaceted question. Which of the following applications of medical marijuana have found positive results? And it lists them. So if you're going to answer them, answer each one individually. Increase appetite for AIDS and HIV patients. Is it a pain reliever for cancer patients? Would it reduce nausea and vomiting for cancer patients? Does it halt the spread of metastatic breast cancer? Does it improve cancer treatment related anorexia? Is it used to treat insomnia? Is it used to treat premenstrual syndrome? Is it used to treat pain in adult multiple sclerosis? And is it used to treat psychotic symptoms? Okay, so hopefully you answered those. Here we go. I made a little graph so it can be more visually appealing to you. Increased appetite for AIDS. It went down in 2017. The opinions and back up again in 18, sorry. Pain relief for cancer. It peaked in 2015. More people thought that it had more pain relief for cancer in 2015 than in 2018. Reduction of nausea and vomiting for cancer patient. The opinion of that has risen to 76% of you think that it has in 2018. And halt the spread of metastatic breast cancer. Ooh, big jump. Not a lot of people, 11.5%, but it jumped like 9% almost. So there you go. More people believe that it's helpful in those areas. Also improve cancer treatment for related anxiety. That number's gone up to 67.5% of you. The treatment of insomnia has gone up. More than half of you think it treats insomnia. Treatment for premenstrual syndrome, 34.6, and it's definitely gone up quite a bit. People think that that's useful for that. Improve cancer treatment, related anxiety too. Remember that one because that'll come up later. Next question, treatment of pain in adult multiple sclerosis. Well, 58.6 of you, and it's gone up quite a bit, now believe in 2018 that it is useful for that. Treatment for psychotic symptoms, another huge jump from 3% to 33%, 30% jump in 2018. So apparently the one thing that holds true for all these questions that we think marijuana has more positive results for all applications listed than we did in the past, back in 2012, especially more than 6 years ago. Has your attitude toward legalization of medical marijuana changed in the last 3 years? Yes, no, maybe I'm reconsidering, or I don't know what I think. There's so much information out there you could get boggled down. So pick one of those, type it in. I'll give you a moment. Okay. Here's your answers, or the answers of your peers. Has your attitude toward legalization of medical marijuana changed in the last 3 years? Don't know. Is that a little, that looks like around 8%? Maybe. It's about 5%, 4 or 5%. No, their attitude hasn't changed. It's about 55% of the people out there that surveyed. And yes, this is a significant number, about 32% of the people surveyed from our database 6 years later have now changed their attitude about medical marijuana. So let's talk about the Controlled Substance Act, which is the schedules for different types of drugs. There's 5 distinct categories or schedules that depend on the drug's acceptable medical use and the drug's abuse or dependency potential. They're numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The DEA, the FDA, and the Department of Health and Human Services determine substance scheduling. All of the above bodies work with medical and scientific communities to determine drug classification. But the one that has the final say on what schedule a controlled substance falls under is the DEA, the Drug Enforcement Agency. When they're evaluating a drug for placement of a drug on a schedule, These are the indications they use. They want to know, is there a potential for abuse? Whether the drug has a current acceptable medical use and treatment, whether there's a level of acceptable safety under medical supervision, and what the dangers of psychological and physical dependence are. Schedule 5 is the least potential for abuse, so it's the lowest level, lower than Schedule 4, and it consists of preparations containing limited quantities of certain types of narcotics. They're generally used for antidiarrheal, antitussive, analgesic purposes. Anything you see with a star on it is an opioid. Examples are Robitussin. Any kind of cough med would fall under here if it has less than 200 milligrams of codeine. Codeine's an opioid, that's why it has a star next to it, but it's really low dose-wise. Lomatol, Modafinil, Lyrica, Parapectilin, those are all under Schedule 5 at the current time. And if you've watched an old home study, that webinar that we had that was called The Medical Marijuana Conundrum, some of these have changed. Some of the schedules have changed, which I found very interesting. Schedule 4 is defined as drugs with a really low risk of abuse and dependence, so a little bit more than Schedule 5, but considered low risk. Examples are Xanax, Soma, Darvon, Darvocet, Valium, Talwin, Ambien, and Tramadol. Schedule 3 are defined as having a moderate to low potential for physical and psychological dependence. Tylenol number 3 is on here as a little bit more codeine, ketamine, anabolic steroids, and testosterone. They fall under Schedule 3 at the current time. Schedule 2 drugs are defined as having a high potential for abuse and severe psychological and physical dependence, with less abuse potential than a Schedule 1, but look, notice the amount of opioids on the list with the stars next to them. Vicodin, any combination with less than 15 milligrams. Cocaine, methamphetamine, methadone, Dilaudid, Demerol, OxyContin, fentanyl, Dexedrine, Adderall, Ritalin. Those are all considered Schedule 2 drugs. Now this is what's going to surprise you. Schedule 1 drugs are defined as substances with high potential for abuse and no accepted medical use. That's the clincher between Schedule 1 and Schedule 2. Schedule 1 has no accepted medical use, according to the DEA. Those Schedule 1 drugs have severe potential for physical and psychological dependence. Well, look what they put on it. Heroin, LSD, marijuana, ecstasy, methylene dioxymethamphetamine, long word, which is ecstasy, methaqualone, and peyote. The big distinction between Schedule 1 and 2, again, instead, is whether the federal government thinks a drug has medical value. The DEA says Schedule 2 substances have some medical value, and Schedule 1 substances do not, so the latter receive more regulatory scrutiny, even though they may not be more dangerous. Heroin is dimorphine, made from morphine, a depressant known for its euphoric effects. LSD is lysergic acid diethylamide, and it's a synthetic psychedelic drug known for its psychologic effects, which include altered awareness of one's surroundings, perceptions and feelings, and may induce panic attacks and extreme anxiety. Okay, we'll skip marijuana for now because we'll talk a lot about it, of course. Ecstasy is a psychoactive stimulant and mild hallucinogenic used for its euphoric effects. Methaqualone or Quaalude is a central nervous system depressant a sedative, hypnotic. Peyote is a hallucinogenic drug prepared from this spineless cactus. Sorry. I started to say cactus and native at the same time. A drug prepared from the spineless cactus native to Mexico and the southern USA. So all those drugs are on Schedule 1 as no acceptable medical use. So let's talk about cannabis, the medical conditions and administration. It's not just for cancer patients anymore. It's also used for HIV/AIDS patients, for hepatitis C patients, for glaucoma, Alzheimer's disease, Crohn's disease, ALS, post-traumatic stress disorder, premenstrual syndrome, wasting disease, severe and persistent muscle spasms, including multiple sclerosis, severe and chronic pain, migraines, and arthritis. So it's a catch-all for a lot of different problems. You can smoke it, vaporize it to inhale, or you can ingest it through a patch or a pill form or different types of edibles. The brownie kind of has a history in the movies and etc. Here's some cannabis products. Fruit chews, drops, and these are legal for sale in states that allow it. Chocolate bars, gummies, there's wax. I don't know what you do with the flour or the wax really, but it just shows my just proof that I don't know. Willie Nelson's line. Oh, and that other line, this line is sold in Colorado at 104 shops. These particular examples are Snoop Dogg's business products. I thought that was interesting. And then Willie Nelson has a line that's at 50 shops in Colorado. In May of 2018, Willie's Reserve partnered with Flow Kana of 2018, a Northern California company that specifically sources from small, grown in the sun, organic cannabis farmers to try to help save those farms in Northern California. And he's got ready rolls. I'm assuming those are joints, chocolates, hard edibles, vape cartridges, and those flower boxes again. What are cannabinoids? Well, cannabis contains 483 compounds, of which 80 are cannabinoids. These are the basis for scientific and medical use. There are 6 important cannabinoids, and they are tetrahydrocannabinol, which is THC. Remember that one because it'll come up a lot. Cannabinol, CBD. Cannabidiol, CBD. Cannabinol, you can really get your tongue twisted with these, is CBN, B-caryophyllene, cannabigerol, and tetrahydrocannabivarin. Those are the big 6. THC is the only plant cannabinoid that we know for sure has clear intoxicating effects on its own. While the others are not intoxicating, their presence can influence how THC affects you. So for example, CBD won't get you high by itself, but it influences the way THC interacts with the CB1 receptors in your own endocannabinoid system, which is a complex system of neurotransmitters in our immune system, tissues, glands, and immune cells. And so therefore it can influence exactly how a cannabis product will affect you. So THC is the big dog there, but some of these others can affect how THC will affect you. Interesting, huh? The FDA has approved several synthetic cannabinoids. These are marketed as Droabinol, Marinol, and Nabilone. All these medications, again, they're synthetic. These are administered orally. Patients usually report at worst, unpleasant side effects, and complain a lot about the cost. These medications come in a pill form as a synthetic chemical form of THC, a naturally occurring component of marijuana. Marinol is approved by the FDA for prescription use for, number 1, chemotherapy-induced nausea and vomiting, and number 2, anorexia from AIDS or cancer. Some of the unpleasant side effects reported are mood changes, dizziness, feeling high, weakness, anxiety, confusion, stomach pain, a warm and tingling feeling, and insomnia. The cost is a problem for a lot of people. Here's a chart that shows the differences between the cost of marijuana and the synthetic version Marinol. Okay, so an average dose of marijuana is 0.5 gram, which costs about $8.57. The average dose of Marinol is 5 milligrams, which is about $9.05. If you get it per gram, marijuana for 1 gram is $17.14. Marinol, $1,810. On an annual basis, marijuana might cost you $6,256, whereas Marinol might cost you $8,258. So you see it's significantly higher to have the man-made version. Interesting. So cannabis, the drug. Medicinal use of cannabis has been traced back to 2900 BC, before Christ, where the Chinese considered it one of the 50 fundamental herbs. It was really interesting. And cannabis sativa is number 9 on the 50 fundamental Chinese herbs list. This is a little picture right here of the Chinese emperor. I don't want to screw up his name too bad. Fu His, circa 2900 BC. Cannabis was considered a very popular medicine that possessed both the yin and the yang. Throughout history, there are recordings of the herb being used as oils and hemp grown for medicinal purposes. It was brought to North America with the Jamestown settlers, and there's proof that George Washington and Thomas Jefferson, among a lot of other historical figures, grew hemp on their farms. Throughout his lifetime, George Washington cultivated hemp at Mount Vernon for industrial uses. The fibers from hemp held excellent properties for the making of rope and sail canvas, which was a major need in the age of the sailing ship. In addition, hemp fibers could be spun into thread for clothing, as indicated in Mount Vernon records, and for use in repairing the large fishing nets that Washington used in his fishing operation along the Potomac. At one point in the 1760s, Washington considered whether hemp would be a more lucrative cash crop than tobacco, but determined that wheat would be a better alternative. During that period when he was considering hemp, he wrote to his agents in England in hope of determining the cost involved in production and in shipping. Interesting, huh? A little history. I have a historical timeline that I looked up. Boy, you could get tied up on this website for decades. It's very interesting. It's a long timeline with every event practically in the history of hemp or marijuana. At this website that I put up here, you could just Google up, it's Procon. It's Procon, sorry, that looks like a C right there. Procon.org, or you can look it up at this, just go to medicalmarijuana.procon.org and then click to the view timeline. It's very interesting. But I've got a few of the big numbers. In 1906, closer to our lifetime, President Roosevelt signed the Wiley Act, which regulated the labeling of products, which included cannabis. And then in 1913, California became the first state to outlaw cannabis. Interesting. In 1937, the Marijuana, spelled with an H, Tax Act of 1937 was enacted to place a tax on the sale of cannabis. So government got wise about getting some money off of it. The American Medical Association, the AMA, opposed the Tax Act as it imposed taxes on the physicians prescribing cannabis, pharmacists selling it, and the medical cannabis cultivation and manufacturing. The federal government encouraged farmers to grow hemp for war from 1942 to 1945, and 400,000 acres were put into production in the United States. The last commercial fields were planted in Wisconsin in 1957. Then right before that, but part of the reason for it is President Lyndon B. Johnson's Commission on Law Enforcement and Administrative Justice said that the 1937 Act was not ineffective, and the 1937 Marijuana Tax Act was repealed in 1970 by the Act for Comprehensive Drug Abuse Prevention and Control. Those are mouthfuls. This is interesting. And August 8th of 2013, Dr. Sanjay Gupta comes out in favor of medical marijuana. If you don't know Dr. Gupta, he's best known at CNN's as CNN's multiple Emmy award-winning chief medical correspondent, hosting the network's weekend health program, Sanjay Gupta MD, and making frequent appearances on their American Morning, Larry King Live, and Anderson Cooper 360-degree program. He's a neurosurgeon in Atlanta, Georgia, and has been in practice for more than 20 years. So Dr. Sanjay Gupta said in several different articles, I mistakenly believed the Drug Enforcement Agency listed marijuana as a Schedule I because of sound scientific proof. Surely they must have quality reasoning as to why marijuana is in this category of the most dangerous drugs that have no acceptable medical use and a high potential for abuse. They didn't have the science to support that claim, and I now know that when it comes to marijuana, neither of these things are true. It doesn't have a high potential for abuse, and there are very legitimate medical applications. We have been terribly and systematically misled for nearly 70 years in the United States, and I apologize for my own role in that. And that Why I Changed My Mind on Weed came out in 2013. He was one of the first physicians to step forward in a public platform. Synthetic marijuana is legal. Remember, THC is the active ingredient in marijuana that makes people high. The DEA's action is notable because it gives Insys, this company that produces these synthetic medications, the exclusive right to manufacture and sell its liquid formation of dronabinol without having to worry about competition. Any other synthetic version not sold as Syndros will still be considered as a Schedule I substance on par with LSD, heroin, and marijuana. It should be noted as a preliminary matter that any form of dronabinol other than in an FDA-approved drug product remains Schedule I controlled substance, and those who handle such material remain subject to the regulatory controls and administrative, civil, and criminal sanctions applicable to a Schedule I controlled substance set forth in the Controlled Substance Act and DEA regulations. So according to Healthcare Blue Book, a 1-month supply of Syndros will cost about $2,000 at a major pharmacy chain. A fair price for Syndros is listed as $1,000. These synthetic marijuanas are named all kinds of fun stuff like K2 Spice, No More Mr. Nice Guy, and hundreds of others, and have been marketed since 2008 in the US. They produce similar effects as marijuana, but with longer durations. They last longer. Dronabinol became a Schedule II for medical use in November of 2017, not too long ago. The incense is sprayed with JWH018, which is a synthetic form of THC. This spray is reportedly an analgesic chemical that acts as a cannabinoid. Spice is not uncommon. Use has significantly increased and has doubled in the last 2 years. The Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration reported the drug abuse visits by people in the age range of 12 to 29 in the thousands. In 2015, poison control centers received 7,794 synthetic cannabinoid calls. Here you go. Synthetic cannabinoid calls to U.S. poison centers for the first part of 2018, from January to the end of April of 2018. And I know these colors down here don't match the colors up here, and I don't know why, because the whole thing was copied as one, and it looks like this on their website. But the darkest color of blue would be the most calls, and then the darker the color, the more calls to poison control centers. These are for synthetic cannabinoid, not for marijuana. So the side effects from Spice and K2 are irregular heartbeat, seizures, agitation, confusion, hallucinations, vomiting, and there are many documented deaths from young people experimenting with these cannabis substitutes. These are synthetic cannabis. No deaths from marijuana alone, but many from the substitutes. Here's some of the other names that some of the cannabis synthetic versions are called. That they're kind of interesting how they try to make them fun. Skunk, black mamba. It's interesting. A little packaging. So let's talk about the plant cannabis, not the synthetic. We're back to the plant. Cannabis exists in three main varieties: sativa, indica, and ruderalis. And you can see a little bit of difference in the way that they look. So let's talk about each one individually. Sativa has a higher THC to cannabinoid ratio than the indica plant. It produces a more cerebral high, indicated by more uplifting and energizing effects. It's used generally prescribed for daytime ingestion due to that uplifting effect. It grows up to 19 feet tall. It has delicate leaves, smooth seeds. It grows really well in India, Thailand, Mexico, and Colombia. Indica has a CBD to THC that can be 4 to 5 times higher than the sativa plant. The effects of smoking this plant are sedative in nature, often described as body melting, and the use of this plant is indicated for nighttime activities or periods of inactivity. It's not used for medical purposes as much as other strains. It grows a maximum of 6 feet, and the leaves are rounder. There's some pictures up here, and less delicate than sativa. Ruderalis are not as common as indicas and sativas. It grows in the north in colder weather, and they can reach a maximum height of 2 feet. The use of ruderalis marijuana is not the chosen product for smoking because it's not as psychoactive. It is more commonly used for breeders and cultivators for other things, such as a genetic source for some hybrid marijuana. There's some pictures down here. Hybrids. What's a hybrid? Well, just like they make hybrid plants, like I had some really cool miniature bottle brush bushes in my yard one time, and they had those pretty pink bottle brushes on them, you know, but they were small. They never grew more than 1.5 feet tall, which I loved because the other kind can take over your life. And so hybrids are like that. They try to create a version by blending multiple versions together in different amounts. Breeding, it's basically plant breeding, so that you can get a breed that is, has certain effects and is more interesting. So they're cultivated plants blending across a wide spectrum. Different hybrids have different advantages depending on the climate and the purpose of use. You can tell whether a hybrid has more indica or sativa based on its height and the spacing of the bud growth and the leaf shape and size and the chemical balance. Cannabis can be grown indoors and outdoors preferred for sativa plants because of their height. The plant is drought resistant, flood resistant, weed resistant, and cold resistant. It also does not need fertilizer or pesticides, and it can be grown in soil that's not fit for food crops. So that's a pretty versatile plant. So it can grow in poor soil and poor climates. When the plant matures, male plants are usually destroyed to prevent pollination of female plants. This reduces seeds and keeps THC concentrations higher. And the life cycle is about 100 days from planting to harvesting. Most plants, each plant, will yield 2.5 ounces. You can see the difference between the male and female plant. Hemp is a cannabis sativa type that's grown for fiber and seeds. These plants are generally unusable for recreational purposes. Marijuana has a high THC content. Hemp has a low THC content. So you won't get high on hemp. As a reference point, any prized recreational cannabis strain has a THC content upwards of 20%. Just so you can understand it better. Hemp may grow to a height as much as 19 feet. Remember, it's a sativa type. And industrial hemp was a desired fiber for rope, canvas, and paper until synthetic materials took their place. Another fun fact on saving our planet, according to a 1916, it's more than 100 years ago, USDA, United States Department of Agriculture, study, it would take 5.4 acres of wood to produce 1 ton of fiber per year, while for the same amount, only 1.33 acres of hemp would suffice. And that's data from 100 plus years ago. Imagine what is achievable with today's technology and our advancements that we have, and with our modern greenhouses, how much we could make. How many trees we could save. China, Australia, and Canada are some of the worldwide leaders in hemp production. It is federally illegal to grow hemp in the United States after the Marijuana Prohibition Act, except for legitimate industrial research. That was passed by Barack Obama Agricultural Act of 2014. 30 states have passed laws on industrial hemp since 2014. Hemp is an environmentally friendly fuel source. It's used for biodiesel, energy bars, protein powders, salad dressing, 25,000 other different uses. These products are legal to purchase in all 50 states. Is it legal to grow? No. Hemp is also, unless it's for legitimate industrial research, but hemp is also used for supplements, body care products, food, paper, clothing, and building materials. It's almost all imported because the federal prohibition of commercial cultivation hinders the American farmer from being able to grow it. How much is hemp worth? Well, or marijuana in particular. The size of the medical marijuana market was around $10 billion in 2017. 4 groups of companies vie for a stake in that money. All the companies that would like to be in it that sell equipment and supplies for the industry, companies who want to be industry leaders in the industry, companies looking to develop the legal market, and companies focused on medical treatment. The global medical marijuana market is expected to reach a value of $55.8 billion US by 2025, according to a new report by Grandview Research Incorporated. In the US market, dominates in recreational use, but Europe dominates in the medical marijuana market over the entire world. The federal government believes that federal law supersedes state law, and that if an exception is made, the CSA, Controlled Substance Act, would become unenforceable. The government also states that consuming one's own locally grown marijuana for medical purposes affects the interstate market, and the federal government may regulate and prohibit that consumption. Here's an example of a response by the DEA to break up California's medical marijuana co-ops and seize their assets. Back in 2005, the United States Supreme Court ruled that under the Commerce Clause of the United States Constitution, the United States may criminalize the production and use of homegrown cannabis, even where states had approved its use. Well, you can imagine what that did. In 2009, the Department of Justice, under Attorney General Eric Holder, issued new guidelines for allowing non-enforcement of the federal ban in certain situations. He said, "It will not be a priority to use federal resources to prosecute patients with serious illness or their caregivers who are complying with state laws on medical marijuana, but we will not tolerate drug traffickers who hide behind claims of compliance with state law to mask activities that are clearly illegal." In the fall of 2011, that brought a federal government crackdown on California's medical marijuana industry. Hundreds of dispensaries were closed up that year, raided and closed, and the tax revenue from the dispensaries generated upwards of $100 million. So there go all that tax money. On September 29th of 2011, the DEA agents raided a legal marijuana garden in Oregon. 70 patients were affected, with some of them coming to obtain product as the raid took place. 2 growers were arrested, and all plants were uprooted and destroyed. Other dispensaries were targeted, such as Harborside Health Center in San Francisco. In Denver, federal prosecutors ordered 37 medical marijuana dispensaries closed because they operated too close to schools. On November 6, 2012, the legalization of marijuana for recreational use became true in states of Colorado and Washington. And images quickly appeared after the implementation of a new law of people partaking in usage in public areas. Public smoking is still illegal. The definition of what is public is another whole giant controversy. Seattle hosts an annual Hemp Fest event as the world's largest gathering advocating decriminalization of marijuana, and it's a 3-day event with an attendance of over 100,000 people. It's the largest, world's largest. And you could see the pictures, but I really thought was funny. Down in the bottom right-hand corner here, they have lots and lots of snacks at this event, and they have this cute little sign on there that says, "This, Hemp Festers, we thought you might be hungry." That's kind of funny. Don't drive while high. Don't give sellers shotgun weed to people under 21. Don't use pot in public. You could be cited, but we'd rather give you a warning. Do listen to The Dark Side of the Moon at a reasonable volume. I thought that was really funny. Well, so what's the story on global medical cannabis? Well, here's the picture of today's global medical cannabis landscape. So the dark blue areas are areas that are legal. And so you can see Canada, parts of the United States, parts of South America, and Europe. The light blue areas have decriminalized it. We have a few in the US. A lot of South America. The pink areas are illegal, but not often enforced. Mexico, and a lot of that peninsula, a little bit of South Africa, and a little bit of Europe, Asia. The red areas are illegal. Texas and quite, scattered states scattered countries. And those gray areas, we just don't have enough information about those countries and whether they do or don't allow it. Interestingly, when you think about world marijuana use, the Netherlands tends to pop up. When you think about sitting around out in public smoking a joint, if that were ever a thing you would do, Amsterdam pops into a lot of people's heads. Well, the Netherlands have decriminalized personal cannabis use. They have coffee shops that sell 5 grams, about 1/6 of an ounce or less, that's legal for them to sell. And they've been doing this for years and years and years. Production and wholesale distribution is still illegal, with fines and imprisonment up to 2 years. This prohibition is strictly enforced. However, coffee shops do still, they sell, and they have menus like you can see in the bottom right-hand corner of the slide, but they can't sell alcohol or hard drugs. They can sell marijuana, but they can't buy it, which is interesting too. But they do, and they sell it. They can't sell to anyone under 18, and they're not allowed to advertise. 25% of the people who visit the Netherlands spend time in coffee shops. Coffee shops have a whole other meaning than the Starbucks we have here in the US. Coffee shops are not allowed to buy cannabis. A lot of coffee shop owners employ third-party buyers who source cannabis to bring it into the shop. Most shops have a weed menu. Again, alcohol is not permitted. On New Year's Day in 2018, the famous Mellow Yellow coffee shop in Amsterdam, along with 28 others in Amsterdam, were closed down because they were within 250 meters of the school. Critics refuted this and questions why pubs and bars were not subject to the same laws. Today, there are 175 coffee shops in Amsterdam alone, which is only half the amount there was in the 90s. Amsterdam has more shops than any other city in the Netherlands. So let's talk about some marijuana myths and legends, because there's quite a few myths surrounding the usage of marijuana, or whether for legal medical use or illicit recreational use. These are the 12 most popular myths. Marijuana has no accepted medical use. There's plenty of studies we were talking about that are proving that there's some use. Marijuana is addictive. That's been proven not to be true. Research has not shown smoked marijuana can treat pain. Well, yes, it has. Medical marijuana is unnecessary since doctors can prescribe Marinol, FDA approved. There's more symptoms and problems with Marinol, though, and it's more expensive. So medical marijuana, might be the better option. The medical community does not support medical marijuana. Only groups that want to legalize drugs support the use of medical marijuana. That's not true either. Marijuana causes cancer. Smoking 1 joint is the same as 5 tobacco cigarettes. Well, that's not true either. So most of these are just myths and legends. Today's marijuana has high levels of THC, which makes it more dangerous. That's not true either. It's the same or depends on the plant. Marijuana is a gateway drug to move on to other kinds of harder and more dangerous drugs. Marijuana isn't the type of drug that makes you go to another more stronger drug after it, so that's not true either. Medical marijuana laws are a method to legalize recreational use. And the people who are supporting the Medical Marijuana Acts are not doing it for recreational use. They're doing it to help pain management and different problems, medical problems. New policies have ended the conflict between state and federal law. Well, that's a myth too. There's still issues, and we'll talk about those. Federal law preempts state law. Well, sort of. The easy answer is federal law preempts state law, but state decriminalization and even authorization of marijuana possession and use do not necessarily conflict with the federal criminal prohibition. And so that you've got that. Number 12, individual patients are not targeted or rated by the DEA. Well, there's one example in 2013 was there were 5 people nicknamed the Kettle Falls 5 who were charged with 5 violations of federal law, including growing, cultivating, and distributing marijuana in a legal state. 3 of them were convicted in 2013, but in January 2018, a federal judge vacated the convictions of the 3 people, with the prosecutor stating that the U.S. was not authorized to spend money on the prosecution of the defendants because the defendants strictly complied with the Washington state medical marijuana laws. So there you go. So cannabis politics are real. A lot of strategists predicted that in the 2016 presidential elections, it would have been a testing ground for new legislation to expand on current and new medical marijuana mandates. And a group called the Drug Policy Alliance spent more than $1.6 million in Washington to help make that happen. Another group gave close to $1 million for the effort in Colorado. The changing demographics of voters, people thought would give supporters an advantage. But did that happen? Well, in the 2018 version of the historic medical marijuana protections and spending bill says that none of the funds made available under this act to the Department of Justice may be used with respect to any of the states of, and it lists all the states and territories, to prevent any of them from implementing their own laws that authorize the use, distribution, possession, or cultivation of medical marijuana. What does that mean? If this bill prohibited the Department of Justice and its affiliated agencies from prosecuting state lawful and compliant medical marijuana businesses and patients. This bill passed both the House of Representatives and Senate in a vote in March, but it is attached to the funding of the federal government's operations that expires after this fiscal year. So we'll see what happens. It's interesting though. The Obama administration was known to have a soft approach, letting states legalize as long as they met certain criteria. Though a lot of businesses deemed legal at the state level were raided by the federal law enforcement. In fact, 270 times under the Obama administration were businesses that were legal at the state were raided by the federal law enforcement agency. In January of 2018, under the Trump administration, Attorney General Jeff Sessions asked the federal law enforcement to crack down on marijuana legalization states. Sessions once said, "Good people don't smoke marijuana," and has long been an opponent of legalized marijuana for any purpose. It remains to be seen how far he's going to go. In effect, the action Sessions has taken will allow federal prosecutors to use their own discretion to crack down on marijuana businesses in states where pot is legal for recreational use. Donald Trump held the stance that the states should make their own laws when he was running for president. And one of my favorite pictures, good old Willie. Whatever the side of the road you choose to stand on, the marijuana debate continues. If you have any questions, we appreciate you coming to this class. And if you have any questions, please type them in the drop-down box. Hopefully you learned something today. We know that you have a choice, and we appreciate you choosing to take your CE from AHEC. Have a great day.